I'm Millie, 36 female. I live in a small, quiet apartment that smells faintly of old paper and lemon tea, a world away from the life I used to know. By day, I'm an archivist at the city's historical society, a job that suits my quiet and methodical nature, a job where I piece together the stories of the past. It's ironic, really, given how my own recent past was systematically dismantled by the people I trusted most. My story is about the dissolution of a marriage, yes, but it's more about the shocking dissolution of a family, bought and paid for by my wealthy, manipulative ex-husband, Donovan. It's a story of how an email, a single digital breadcrumb, exposed a conspiracy of betrayal that ran deeper than I could have ever imagined, and gave me the tools to reclaim not just my finances, but my dignity. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My marriage to Donovan Sterling wasn't a fairy tale, but for a long time, it was a very convincing imitation. We met in my late 20s when I was cataloging historical documents for a museum he was funding. He was charming, powerful, and relentless in his pursuit. He saw me, a quiet, bookish woman, as a sort of elegant, calming accessory to his chaotic, high-powered life as a real estate tycoon. I, in turn, was swept away by the whirlwind of it all, the galas, the international travel, the feeling of being adored by a man the world seemed to admire. We married within a year, and I settled into our sprawling, minimalist mansion, a place so large and sterile it always felt more like a modern art gallery than a home. The early years were pleasant enough. I had my work, which I loved, and Donovan had his empire. He was often busy, flying to different cities to oversee new developments, but he would shower me with expensive gifts upon his return as if to apologize for his absence. A diamond bracelet for a missed anniversary, a rare first edition book for my birthday. I told myself this was just the reality of being married to a man of his stature. But as time went on, the gifts began to feel less like tokens of affection and more like transactions, payments for my silence and compliance. The first real crack appeared about 5 years into our marriage. Donovan had just closed a massive deal, and he threw a lavish party at our home to celebrate. He was in his element, holding court among investors and city officials, his voice booming with confidence. I was making my way through the crowd when I overheard a conversation not meant for my ears. One of his junior partners was talking to another guest. "Donovan is a genius," the partner slurred slightly, a glass of champagne tilting precariously in his hand. "He can sell ice to a polar bear, convinced the city that a luxury high-rise on a protected wetland was eco-friendly. The man has no conscience, just a calculator for a heart." The other guest chuckled nervously and changed the subject. I felt a cold chill despite the warmth of the crowded room. I knew Donovan was ruthless in business, it was part of his public persona, but hearing it framed so starkly as a lack of conscience was unsettling. When I later brought it up, asking him gently about the wetland project, his charm evaporated instantly. His eyes, usually bright with amusement, turned as cold and hard as steel. "Millie, don't concern yourself with business," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You handle the house and the social calendar. I'll handle the world. That's our arrangement." It wasn't a discussion, it was a decree. I was being put back in my pretty, gilded cage. After that night, I started to notice things I had previously ignored. The way he spoke to service staff with a casual disdain, the almost imperceptible smirk on his face when a business rival faced a setback, the way he'd subtly pit his own executives against each other for sport. He was a master manipulator, and I realized with a dawning horror that our marriage was not a partnership, but another one of his assets, and I was its curator. My role was to be poised, elegant, and unquestioning. Any deviation was met with a chilling emotional distance or a cutting remark disguised as a joke. My family, particularly my younger brother Leo, was completely enamored with him. Leo was 32 and had drifted from one failed business idea to another, always dreaming of a big break that never materialized. To him, Donovan wasn't just a brother-in-law, he was a god. Donovan would occasionally toss him a few $1,000s, calling it an investment in Leo's latest venture, a gesture that bought him my brother's undying loyalty. My parents, too, were blinded by Donovan's wealth and influence. "You're so lucky, Millie," my mother would often say. "He takes such good care of you." They saw the mansion, the designer clot. He's the charity galas I chaired. They didn't see the silent dinners, the condescending pats on my head, or the profound loneliness that had become my constant companion. They didn't want to see it. It was easier to believe in the fairy tale. The final straw came not with a bang, but with a quiet, devastating discovery. I had been feeling unwell for a few weeks, and after a series of tests, my doctor called me in. The news was difficult. I had a significant fertility issue that would make conceiving a child naturally nearly impossible. It was a blow, but one I thought Donovan and I would face together. When I told him that evening, his reaction was not one of comfort or solidarity. He stared at me from across our cavernous living room, his expression unreadable. After a long, heavy silence, he simply said, "Well, that's disappointing. A sterling heir was always part of the long-term plan." He didn't touch me. He didn't offer a single word of support. He spoke of our potential child as a sterling heir, a business asset, a component of his dynastic ambitions. In that moment, the entire facade of our marriage crumbled into dust. I saw him for what he was, a cold, calculating narcissist who viewed everyone, including his own wife, as a piece on his chessboard. I knew then that I couldn't spend another day in that house, in that life. The next morning, while he was at a board meeting, I packed a single suitcase, called a lawyer whose name I'd found online, and walked out of the gilded cage for good, naively believing my family would be there to catch me. Leaving Donovan was like stepping out of a climate-controlled building into a hurricane. The moment his lawyers received the divorce papers from my attorney, Isabel Reed, his entire demeanor shifted from cold indifference to strategic warfare. The man who had once claimed to love me was now my sworn enemy, and he was determined to win, not just in court, but in the court of public opinion, which, to my shock and horror, included my own family. The first salvo was financial. Donovan's lawyers immediately filed a motion to freeze our joint accounts, claiming I was financially irresponsible and a flight risk. Suddenly, the credit cards I'd used for a decade were declined. The savings I thought were half mine were locked away behind a legal firewall. I was left with only the few $1,000s I had in a personal account from my modest archivist salary. It was a classic power move, designed to leave me panicked and desperate. Isabel had warned me this would happen. "Men like Donovan don't just let people go," she'd said during our first meeting, her gaze sharp and assessing. "They see it as a loss and they hate to lose. He will try to crush you. Our job is to not let him." I moved into a small, furnished apartment, the kind with thin walls and mismatched furniture. The quiet was deafening after years in the echoing halls of the mansion. I called my parents to tell them I had left Donovan, expecting sympathy, or at least a listening ear. Instead, I was met with stunned, disapproving silence. "Millie, what have you done?" my mother finally asked, her voice laced with panic. "You can't just leave a man like Donovan. What on earth did he do that was so bad?" I tried to explain the years of emotional neglect, the coldness, the way he treated me like property. My words felt flimsy and inadequate against the towering reality of Donovan's wealth. "All marriages have their ups and downs," my father chimed in, his tone dismissive. "You're being overly emotional. You need to go back and work this out before you throw away the best thing that ever happened to you." The best thing that ever happened to me. The words stung more than any of Donovan's insults. They weren't seeing my pain, they were seeing the potential loss of their proximity to power and money. But the worst was yet to come. My brother, Leo, was openly hostile. "You're insane, Millie," he spat over the phone. "Donovan has been nothing but generous to this family, to me. You're throwing it all away over some petty drama. You're selfish. Did you even think about how this affects the rest of us?" He hung up before I could even respond. A week later, the true nature of Donovan's strategy became clear. He began a subtle but vicious smear campaign, and he was using my family as his primary weapon. At a family dinner I wasn't invited to, he apparently showed up, looking heartbroken and distraught. He told them I was unstable, that I had been acting erratically for months, and that he was deeply concerned for my mental well-being. He painted himself as the victim, the loving husband trying to save his troubled wife. And they believed him, every single word. My phone calls went unanswered. My texts were left on read. When I showed up at my parents' house, my mother met me at the door, her face a mask of strained pity. "Millie, dear, Donovan told us you might be having some sort of breakdown. He's willing to pay for the best doctors, a private facility." I stared at her, dumbfounded. He wasn't just divorcing me, he was trying to have me declared mentally incompetent to discredit me in the divorce proceedings. And my own mother was his willing accomplice. The public shunning was complete. My aunts and uncles, who had once praised my perfect marriage, now looked at me with suspicion. Old family friends suddenly became too busy to meet for coffee. It was as if a memo had been circulated to everyone I had ever known. "Millie is the problem. Side with Donovan." He had successfully isolated me, turning my entire support system into an army of strangers. The loneliness was an ache so profound it felt physical. I would sit in my tiny apartment at night, surrounded by boxes of legal documents from Isabel, and wonder if I was, in fact, going crazy. Donovan's gaslighting was so effective that even I started to doubt my own reality. Was I being too sensitive? Was I the one who had ruined everything? The one person who didn't join the chorus was my cousin, Sadie. She was my mother's sister's daughter, and we had always been close, more like sisters than cousins. She worked as a vet tech, a grounded, no-nonsense woman with a huge heart. When she heard what was happening, she was the only one who called me not to judge, but to listen. "That sounds exactly like something a man like Donovan would do," she said, her voice full of righteous anger. "And I'm so sorry that Aunt Carol and Uncle Mark are being such fools. Money makes people stupid." Her support was a lifeline in a sea of abandonment. She would come over with takeout, help me sort through paperwork, and just sit with me while I cried. She was the only person who reminded me that I wasn't the monster Donovan was painting me to be. "He's trying to break you, Millie," she said one evening, her hand on my shoulder. "Don't let him." But it was hard to be strong when I felt so utterly alone, cast out by the very people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I had lost my husband, my home, and now my family. Donovan had taken everything, and I had no idea how I could possibly fight back. The divorce proceedings dragged on, a slow, grinding process designed to wear me down. Donovan's legal team was formidable, a pack of sharks in $1,000 suits who specialized in high-conflict divorces. They buried Isabel in paperwork, filing motion after motion to delay and drain my already dwindling finances. Their main argument was that since I had signed a prenuptial agreement, I was entitled to virtually nothing. The prenup was ironclad, or so they claimed, and their strategy was to paint me as a gold digger who was now trying to renege on a fair deal. Added to this was the narrative of my instability, which they hinted at in every filing. They requested psychological evaluations and subpoenaed my personal journals, looking for anything they could twist into evidence of an unsound mind. It was psychological warfare, and it was working. I felt small and powerless. My days were a bleak routine of going to my quiet job at the archives, then coming home to a mountain of legal correspondence that made my head spin. My family's silence continued, a constant, painful reminder of my isolation. Leo had blocked my number completely. My parents would send terse, formal texts asking if I had come to my senses yet and gone back to Donovan. Every message felt like a fresh betrayal. They had chosen their side, and it wasn't with their daughter. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. I was at work, meticulously cataloging a collection of letters from the 19th century, when my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from my cousin, Sadie. The subject line was just one word: read. There was no text in the body of the email, only a forwarded message chain. My heart started to beat a little faster as I opened it. The email was a conversation between two people, my brother, Leo, and my ex-husband, Donovan. My blood ran cold. The chain started a few days after I had filed for divorce. The first email was from Leo to Donovan. It was sickeningly sycophantic. Subject, checking in. Donovan, I just heard the awful news about Millie. I am so sorry you're having to go through this. I want you to know that none of us support her reckless decision. She's not thinking clearly, and we're all worried about her. Please let me know if there is anything at all I can do for you. You've been a great friend to me, and I'll always have your back. Best, Aaliyah. Donovan's reply was smooth and masterfully manipulative. Subject, Ray, checking in. Aaliyah, thank you for reaching out. This has been an incredibly difficult time. I'm just trying to do what's best for Millie, but she's not listening to reason. It means the world to me to know I have your support. The loyalty of family is everything. On another note, I know things have been tough for you on the job front. IJ. Us finalized the acquisition of a new commercial property management firm. There's a regional manager position opening up that requires someone loyal, someone I can trust implicitly. It comes with a 6-figure salary and a significant performance bonus. I immediately thought of you. Of course, during this sensitive time, my business decisions have to be impeccable. I can only bring people into my inner circle who have demonstrated absolute, unwavering loyalty. Let's talk more soon. Regards, Donovan Sterling. I had to read it 3 times to fully absorb the venom in those words. It was all there, in black and white. A bribe, a job offer in exchange for unwavering loyalty. He wasn't just asking for Leo's support, he was buying it. He was explicitly instructing my brother to side with him against me, and the reward was the career Leo had always dreamed of but never earned. Leo's response was immediate and pathetic. Subject, Ray, checking. Donovan, I'm speechless. Thank you. This is an incredible opportunity. Consider my loyalty unwavering and absolute. You won't have to worry about a thing from our side of the family. I'll make sure everyone is on the same page. Millie won't get any support from us. You can count on it. When can we talk specifics about the role? I felt sick to my stomach. This was why my family had turned on me so completely and so quickly. It wasn't just about being dazzled by Donovan's wealth, it was a calculated business transaction. My brother had sold me out, had sold our family's love and support for a job. He had actively worked to ensure I was isolated, all to secure his own future. The pain of it was sharp and suffocating. It was a betrayal so profound that it eclipsed everything Donovan had done. Donovan was my enemy, but Leo was my brother. My hands were shaking as I scrolled to the top of the email chain to see how Sadie had gotten this. It turned out that Leo, in his arrogance and incompetence, had been trying to forward the job offer details from Donovan to his own personal email, but had accidentally sent it to a group of cousins, including Sadie. He must have realized his mistake and sent a frantic recall message, but it was too late. Sadie had seen it. I immediately called her, my voice trembling. Sadie, I got your email. I know, honey, she said, her voice filled with a quiet rage on my behalf. I am so sorry, that absolute snake. And Leo, I have no words for him. He sold me out, I whispered, the reality of it finally sinking in. He traded me for a paycheck. Yes, he did, Sadie said firmly. But he also just handed you the weapon you need to burn Donovan's entire case to the ground. In that moment, through the haze of pain and betrayal, a different feeling began to surface. A cold, clear, simmering anger. She was right. This wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was evidence. It was proof of Donovan's manipulation, his attempts to unduly influence witnesses, my own family, in our divorce case. He had tried to break me by isolating me, but in doing so, he had made a mistake. And my brother, in his greed, had just delivered the proof right to my inbox. The game had just changed. Armed with the email chain, I felt a surge of purpose I hadn't experienced in months. The hurt was still there, a deep, raw wound, but it was now overlaid with a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't just a victim anymore, I was a woman with evidence. I immediately forwarded the email to Isabel Reed with the subject line, "Urgent proof of witness tampering." Less than an hour later, she called me. Her usually calm, measured tone was gone, replaced by a crackling energy. "Millie, this is it," she said, the excitement palpable in her voice. "This is the smoking gun. He's been trying to paint you as unstable, but this email proves he has been actively manipulating and coercing your family to isolate you and testify against you. A judge will take a very, very dim view of this. This is more than just bad behavior, it's a form of collusion." "So what do we do?" I asked, my knuckles white as I gripped the phone. "We don't show our hand yet," Isabel advised, her strategic mind already working. "He thinks he's in complete control. Let's let him keep thinking that. This email is our ace. We play it when it will cause the maximum possible damage. In the meantime, this gives us a new direction. If he's willing to do this, what else is he willing to do? You said his business dealings were sometimes questionable." Her questions sparked a memory, the overheard conversation at the party years ago about the wetland project. "He's ruthless," I said, thinking back. "He brags about finding loopholes, about making problems disappear. He has a team of accountants who are known for being creative." "Creative accountants," Isabel mused. "That's very interesting. He's presented us with a pristine financial disclosure, claiming his net worth is significant but straightforward. I'm willing to be. That's a lie. Men like Donovan who crave control in their personal lives almost always crave it in their financial lives. They hide assets. It's standard procedure." That's when my skills as an archivist kicked in. My job was all about finding patterns, connecting disparate pieces of information, and digging through mountains of data to find the truth. I had spent years organizing the chaotic records of other people's lives. It was time to do it for my own. "Let me see his financial disclosures," I told Isabel. "All of them. Bank statements, tax returns, everything his lawyers have sent over." That evening, Isabel sent me a link to a secure digital folder containing hundreds of pages of financial documents. For the next 3 weeks, my small apartment became a war room. I printed everything out, spreading papers across my floor and taping them to my walls. I bought colored pens and highlighters, creating a complex key for different types of transactions. I worked late into the night, fueled by coffee and a burning sense of injustice. At first, it was overwhelming. Donovan's empire was a tangled web of shell corporations, LLCs, and offshore accounts. It was designed to be confusing, to make anyone trying to follow the money give up in frustration. But he underestimated me. He had always seen my quiet, meticulous nature as a weakness, a sign of a placid and uninteresting personality. He never realized that my talent for deep, focused research was a superpower. I started to see things. Small, regular payments to an LLC I'd never heard of, Sterling Horizons. The amounts were inconsistent, ranging from $10,000 to $50,000, coded as consulting fees. There were wire transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands, conveniently made just before our official separation date. He was moving money, trying to make it disappear before it could be considered a marital asset. The real breakthrough came when I started cross-referencing the financial records with his travel itineraries, which I still had access to from our shared digital calendar. I noticed a pattern. Every time he made a trip to Zurich for a banking conference, a large sum of money would be withdrawn from one of his primary business accounts and then seem to vanish. But there was always a corresponding, though not identical, deposit into an account for a trust based in Liechtenstein a few days later. The trust's name, the Leo Foundation. My blood ran cold. The Leo Foundation. He was naming his hidden accounts after my brother. It was a sick, arrogant joke, a testament to the loyalty he had purchased. He was so confident that no one would ever look, so sure of my brother's silence that he was practically taunting me. I dug deeper into Sterling Horizons. A quick search of public business records showed it was a company with a single director. I almost fell out of my chair when I saw the name, Mark Peterson. My father's name is Mark Peterson. It couldn't be a coincidence. I kept digging and found the address registered to the LLC. It was a P.O. box in a town my parents had never even visited. It was a shell, a ghost company, and Donovan was using it to funnel money, very likely with my father's knowledge. Was this another bribe? Was my own father also on Donovan's payroll? I compiled everything into a detailed, color-coded report, complete with timelines, flow charts showing the movement of money, and highlighted bank statements. I documented over $15 million in hidden assets, money he was trying to shield from the divorce settlement. I had him. I had the email proving witness tampering, and now I had a meticulously researched dossier proving financial fraud. I sent the entire package to Isabel. Her response was a single, triumphant line. "He's not going to know what hit him." For the first time since I left my marriage, I felt a flicker of hope. Donovan had built his empire on secrets and manipulation, but I had found the cracks in his foundation, and I was about to bring the whole thing crashing down. With the evidence in hand, Isabel and I shifted our strategy from defense to offense. The time for quiet suffering was over. It was time to set a trap. "He thinks you're on the ropes, financially and emotionally," Isabel explained during a late-night strategy session in her office. "We're going to use that arrogance against him. We will request a settlement conference. We'll go in looking defeated, ready to accept his lowball offer. We'll let him think he has won completely. Then, at the final hearing, we present our findings to the judge. The shock value will be immense, and it will give him no time to prepare a counterargument." The plan was brilliant in its simplicity. It preyed on Donovan's greatest weakness, his ego. He needed not just to win, but to see me utterly defeated. Giving him that illusion would make the eventual fall all the more devastating. First, Isabel instructed me to call my pa. Rents, it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I needed to play the part of the broken daughter, ready to surrender. I dialed the number, my heart pounding. My mother answered, her voice wary. "Millie." "Hi, Mom," I said, letting my voice crack just enough. I can't do this anymore. You were right. All of you were right. Donovan's lawyers are crushing me. I have nothing left. I'm going to accept whatever settlement he offers. I just want this to be over." There was a pause on the other end, and then a sigh of what sounded like relief. "Oh, Millie, I think that's for the best," she said, her tone softening with pity. "It was a mistake to challenge a man like him. We'll be here for you once it's all settled." The lie was sickening, but I held my tongue. I knew, with chilling certainty, that she would report this conversation to Leo, who would in turn report it to his new master, Donovan. The bait was in the water. Next, Isabel sent a formal letter to Donovan's legal team requesting a settlement conference. In it, she adopted a conciliatory tone, stating that her client was emotionally and financially exhausted and wished to resolve this matter amicably and swiftly. As expected, they agreed immediately, sensing a quick and total victory. The settlement conference was held a week later in a sterile, soulless room at a mediation firm. Donovan was there, looking impeccable in a tailored suit, a smug, barely concealed smirk on his face. He sat flanked by his two lead attorneys. I sat opposite him with Isabel, my posture deliberately slumped, my eyes downcast. I looked, for all intents and purposes, like a woman who had been thoroughly beaten. Donovan's lawyer laid out their offer. It was insulting. It was essentially the bare minimum stipulated in the prenup, a one-time payment of $250,000 and my old car. In exchange, I would have to sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement, preventing me from ever speaking about our marriage or his business dealings. They also demanded I publicly retract any damaging allegations against him. Donovan watched me, his eyes glittering with triumph. He was savoring this moment, the final confirmation of his absolute power over me. "I think you'll find this is more than generous, Millie," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "It's enough for you to start a new, quiet life. It's for the best." I took a deep breath and looked at Isabel. She gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. I turned back to Donovan, making sure to keep my expression one of weary resignation. "Fine," I whispered, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "I accept." The smirk on Donovan's face widened into a full-blown grin. His lawyers exchanged self-satisfied glances. They had won. They scheduled the final hearing with the court for 2 weeks' time, a formality to have the judge sign off on our agreement. The next 2 weeks were agonizing. I had to maintain the charade, ignoring the pitying looks from my family and the triumphant silence from Donovan. Leo even had the audacity to send me a text. "Heard you came to your senses. Glad you're finally being smart about this." I wanted to scream. I wanted to send him a screenshot of his own treacherous email, but I held back. Patience was key. The trap was set. Now we just had to wait for the final, public springing of it. During this time, Isabel was not idle. She formally subpoenaed my brother, Leo, and my father to appear at the final hearing. Her reasoning, as stated in the subpoena, was that they needed to provide testimony regarding my state of mind to support the settlement agreement, an agreement Donovan believed was in his favor. His lawyers, confident and unsuspecting, didn't object. Why would they? They thought my family were their star witnesses, ready to testify about how unstable and unreasonable I was. They had no idea they were walking their key players directly into our ambush. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my small apartment, the quiet hum of the refrigerator the only sound. For months, I had been adrift in a sea of betrayal and despair. But now, on the eve of the final battle, I felt a strange calm. Donovan, Leo, my parents, they had all underestimated me. They saw me as quiet, weak, and pliable. They never bothered to look deeper. They never understood that the quietest people are often the most observant. They had built their conspiracy on a foundation of lies. And tomorrow, I was going to hand the judge a hammer and show her exactly where to strike. The courtroom was a cold, imposing space with dark wood paneling and fluorescent lights that hummed overhead. It felt like the perfect setting for the final act of this miserable play. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Isabel, dressed in a simple, professional navy blue dress. I felt a nervous tremor in my hands, but forced myself to keep my expression neutral. Across the aisle, Donovan sat with his legal team, looking relaxed and confident. He gave me a brief, dismissive glance, the look of a king observing a peasant. In the gallery behind him sat my family, my mother, my father, and my brother, Leo. They were all there, ready to be his character witnesses to put the final nail in my coffin. They avoided my gaze, looking straight ahead with expressions of solemn duty. The irony was nauseating. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s named Judge Alani, entered, and we all rose. She reviewed the file in front of her. "It is my understanding that the parties have reached a settlement agreement," she said, her voice crisp. "We are here today to finalize that agreement and put it on the record. Is that correct?" Donovan's lead attorney stood up. "Yes, Your Honor, we have a signed agreement. Ms. Sterling has agreed to the terms of the prenuptial agreement. We believe this is a fair and equitable resolution." Judge Alani looked over at our table. "Ms. Reed, does your client agree?" This was the moment. Isabel rose slowly, her presence commanding. "No, Your Honor," she said, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the smug atmosphere in the room. "My client does not agree. We are here today to petition the court to invalidate the prenuptial agreement on the grounds of fraudulent disclosure, coercion, and witness tampering on the part of the defendant, Mr. Sterling." A shocked murmur went through the courtroom. Donovan's head snapped toward us, his confident smile vanishing, replaced by a look of utter disbelief. His lawyers began whispering furiously to each other. My family looked confused, their prepared narrative suddenly irrelevant. "Those are very serious allegations, Ms. Reed," the judge said, her eyes narrowing. "You had better have substantial proof." "We do, Your Honor," Isabel replied calmly. She walked to the clerk and handed over a thick binder. "We have compiled a complete dossier. But first, with the court's permission, I would like to call my first witness, Mr. Leo Peterson." Leo looked stunned as his name was called. He shot a panicked look at Donovan, who gave him a slight, almost imperceptible shake of the head. But a subpoena is not a request. Leo shuffled to the witness stand, looking pale and nervous. Isabel approached him gently. "Mr. Peterson, you are the plaintiff's brother, is that correct?" "Yes," Leo mumbled. "And it is also correct that in the weeks following your sister's separation from her husband, you and your parents ceased all contact and support for her, correct?" Leo shifted uncomfortably. We were concerned for her. We felt she was making a mistake. A mistake to leave a man who was so generous? Isabel prodded. Tell me, Mr. Peterson, are you currently employed? Yes, Leo said, puffing his chest out slightly. I am a regional manager at Sterling Property Management. A good job pays well. Yes, it's a very good job. And when did you get this job? Isabel asked, her voice still even. A few months ago. Was it, by any chance, shortly after your sister filed for divorce? Leo's eyes darted nervously toward Donovan again. I believe so. Your Honor, Isabel said, turning to the judge. I would like to present Exhibit A. She placed a printed copy of the email chain on the projector so the entire courtroom could see it. Leo's face went white as his own words, his own sycophantic, treacherous words, appeared on the screen. Mr. Peterson, Isabel's voice was now like ice. Could you please read the email from Mr. Sterling where he discusses your unwavering loyalty in exchange for a six-figure job, the job you now hold? The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Leo stared at the screen, speechless. Donovan's face was a thunderous mask of fury. My father had his head in his hands, and my mother looked like she was going to be sick. I can't, Leo stammered. Allow me, Isabel said, and she read the damning exchange aloud. When she finished, she turned back to Leo. So, Mr. Peterson, was your lack of support for your sister born out of genuine concern, or was it a condition of your employment? Did you sell your familial loyalty for a job? Leo crumbled. Donovan said, he just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page. The same page of his script, you mean? Isabel retorted. She then turned to my father and had him confirm his name and that he was the sole director of the shell company, Sterling Horizons, showing the documents on the screen. My father, a man I'd always seen as strong, looked small and defeated, admitting he knew nothing about the company and had just signed the papers Donovan's lawyers put in front of him as a favor. Finally, Isabel presented my financial analysis, the detailed charts and highlighted statements showing the $15 million in hidden assets, including the Leo Foundation Trust. She demonstrated, with methodical precision, how Donovan had systematically hidden idle assets and committed financial fraud. By the end of it, Donovan's legal team was in disarray. Their entire case, built on my supposed instability and their client's integrity, had been annihilated. Donovan himself was seething, his face red with rage and humiliation. The judge looked at him, her expression one of utter contempt. Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. In my 20 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a blatant and disgusting display of manipulation, coercion, and fraud. You have not only attempted to defraud your wife, but you have also actively suborned perjury and tampered with witnesses. You have made a mockery of this court. She slammed her gavel down. The prenuptial agreement is hereby invalidated. All assets, including the $15 million you attempted to hide, will be considered marital property and subject to a 50-50 division. Furthermore, I am ordering you to pay all of Ms. Sterling's legal fees, and I am forwarding this entire case file to the district attorney's office for investigation into potential criminal charges. It was over, I had won. As the judge left the bench, I looked over at my family. Leo was crying silently. My mother wouldn't look at me. My father just looked old and broken. Then I looked at Donovan. For a single moment, our eyes met across the courtroom. The mask of charm was gone. All I saw was pure, unadulterated hatred. He had lost, and he would never forgive me for it. But I didn't care. I felt nothing but the sweet, quiet relief of justice. Walking out of that courtroom was like taking my first breath of clean air after years in a smoke-filled room. The weight that had been pressing down on me for so long had finally lifted. Isabel walked beside me, a rare, genuine smile on her face. You were incredible, Millie, she said, squeezing my arm. You stayed strong and you did the work. You beat him at his own game. For the first time, I truly believed it. The aftermath was swift and decisive. The court-ordered division of assets meant I was financially secure, more than I had ever dreamed of being. But the money was secondary. What mattered was the validation, the public acknowledgement of Donovan's deception and my truth. As the judge had promised, the DA's office launched an investigation into his financial dealings, leading to a cascade of legal problems for his company. His carefully constructed empire began to show cracks, and his reputation as an untouchable tycoon was shattered. He was so mired in legal battles that he had no time or energy left for me. He was, for all intents and purposes, out of my life for good. My family, however, was a different story. The shame and humiliation of what had been exposed in court hung over them like a shroud. A few days after the hearing, my mother called me, her voice thick with tears. "Millie, we are so sorry," she sobbed. "We were fools. We were blinded by him, by his money. Can you ever forgive us?" I listened to her apologies and my father's stammered regrets that followed. I knew their remorse was genuine, born from the harsh light of public exposure. But forgiveness was a complicated thing. "I hear you," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "and I appreciate the apology. But the trust is gone. It's going to take a long time to see if that can ever be rebuilt." I didn't scream or rage. I simply stated the truth. They had made their choice, and choices have consequences. We left the conversation there, with a fragile, uncertain path ahead. Leo was the most affected. Donovan fired him the day after the hearing, his unwavering loyalty no longer a valuable commodity. He was left with no job, no prospects, and the deep shame of knowing he had betrayed his own sister for nothing. He sent me a long, rambling email full of self-pity and desperate apologies. I read it, deleted it, and felt a profound sense of pity for the weak, greedy man he had become. Our relationship was broken, perhaps irreparably. I couldn't see a future where I would ever trust him again. The one relationship that was strengthened through the fire was the one I had with Sadie. She had been my rock, my one true ally when everyone else had abandoned me. She celebrated my victory as if it were her own. "I never doubted you for a second," she told me over a celebratory dinner. Her unwavering faith in me was a gift I would cherish forever. She was my family now, in the way that truly mattered. With my newfound freedom and financial independence, I made some changes. I bought a small, charming house in a historic neighborhood, one with a beautiful garden and a cozy reading nook. I filled it with books, art, and comfortable furniture, things that made me feel at peace, a stark contrast to Donovan's sterile mansion. I continued my work at the archives, not because I needed the money, but because I loved it. It grounded me, connecting me to stories of the past, reminding me that lives are long and complex, full of trials and triumphs. I started to heal. I went to therapy to work through the trauma of the betrayal. I reconnected with old friends who had been pushed away during my marriage to Donovan. I traveled, not to glamorous resorts for galas, but to quiet, beautiful places that nourished my soul. I learned to trust my own judgment again, to value my own quiet strength. One afternoon, about a year after the divorce was finalized, I was sorting through a new donation at the archives, a box of old family photos and letters. As I carefully pieced together the story of a family from a century ago, their joys and sorrows documented in faded ink, I felt a deep sense of contentment. My own story had been one of betrayal and pain, but I had navigated it. I had uncovered the truth, fought for justice, and emerged stronger on the other side. The ashes of my old life had been painful, but from them, I was building something new, something real, something that was entirely my own. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt truly free.